Hey, everybody. Welcome to the GMI Rocket Show. Today's episode number 116. I'm your host, Roman Zelchenko, former immigration lawyer turned entrepreneur, founder of Laborless, H-1B compliance startup that automates LCA and PAF compliance, as well as the founder of GMI Rocket, which is a digital marketing agency focused on the immigration and global mobility industry, and of course, which brings you this show. Super excited for today's episode. Our guest today is Steve Recio, who is the CEO and founder of Pipefile. So we're going to get all into what Pipefile does, but basically it is a startup that enables immigration law firms and actually lots of other professionals really easily and effectively gather documentation and information from clients. Now, a lot of people think, well, why would I need a separate app for that? A lot of kind of case management and other kind of platforms do have ways to, have upload features and things like that. But as we'll talk about with Steve, actually getting documents from clients is a pretty big pain point. And oftentimes cases don't move ahead specifically because, lawyers are waiting for documents to be provided by their clients. So Steve and his team at Pipefile have figured out a way to, make this easier and faster and more efficient. So we're going to get into all of that. Before we jump in, I just want to say thank you to the main sponsor of this episode, DocketWise. If you are an immigration lawyer, you've probably heard of DocketWise, but just in case you haven't, DocketWise is an all-in-one immigration case management and CRM platform. It has incredible immigration forms in many, many different languages. It has customizable questionnaires to send to your clients to get information from them. It has industry-leading integrations. They're the first platform to actually have an open API. My company, Laborless, has an integration with them, and they have awesome customer service. One thing I really like about DocketWise is that fact that not only do they have a great product, they actually do a lot for the industry from a content standpoint. They have a podcast. They have a really great blog. I actually just sent a few blogs to somebody who reached out to me with questions about the immigration space. And I was like, well, DocketWise has a blog post on that. They sponsor a lot of events. They make this show possible. So really grateful for the team at DocketWise. Check them out. There's a link in the show notes here, wherever you're listening or watching, or visit them at www.docketwise.com and tell them you heard about them from the GMI Rocket Show. Okay. Without further ado, Steve, thank you so much for being here. Excited to jump into your story, learn about you, your background and Pipefile and, what it brings to the industry.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Roman.
Yeah, of course. So, the way I like to start these episodes always is, background story on the founder. I think it's actually really important to learn about, where do you come from? What's your motivation? What makes you tick? I think when we get to finally how a company is started and what it does, based on everything that a person's been through, it actually makes so much more sense. Otherwise, it's like, oh, it's a random person who started a random company. From your perspective, you do have immigration in your family's history, right? So your father and his family, came directly from Cuba. And, you mentioned that you grew up when that was sort of something that really was kind of part of your life. Maybe you never thought about it. I don't know if you identified with growing up in an immigrant household, but what was that experience like for you, growing up in that, environment and speaking Spanish, food, etc.?
Yeah, for sure. My dad immigrated from Cuba to the US when he was 7 years old. So he was actually part of a program called the Pedro Pan program, where the Catholic Church sent a bunch of very young children to the US, actually without their parents. So he actually immigrated by himself without his family at 7 years old. That definitely kind of shaped me and our family. Going to my grandparents' house. My grandparents immigrated to the U.S. As adults with 3 kids, and so going to their household and eating Cuban food, speaking Spanish, was definitely kind of formative as a kid. So that definitely helped shape me, and just seeing the struggle that they went through, and always kind of hearing the stories about it. Obviously the immigrant story, coming to the U.S. As adults, not speaking the language, not having any money, kind of starting from zero at that age, definitely helped shape me for sure.
So you were born in the U.S., right?
Yeah. I was born in Miami.
Did you, kind of growing up, did you feel, obviously you're American and you're an American citizen. English
Mhm.
was, if not
Yep,
your first language at home, certainly your main language because of school and where you grew up.
of
But did
course.
you feel
Yep.
that you like were connected with the immigrant community? You came from this household where presumably maybe your dad had an accent or just you hear that at home. Like,
Mhm.
did you have any of that feeling or identity growing up?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, I'm half Cuban, right? So my mom
Right.
was born in America. She was born in Pittsburgh. So it was definitely a upbringing of kind of like a dual identity, I would say.
Mm.
Obviously feeling very American, but obviously like our family get-togethers were very heavily influenced by Spanish and Latin culture for sure. And just going to my grandparents' house and speaking Spanish with them all the time, definitely was definitely part of it for sure. And just hearing the stories of the Cuban, the family friends and all that who immigrated from Cuba as well, for sure.
Any particular stories that you feel like were formative for you? Kind of hearing about either challenges or struggles or maybe things they miss?
Yeah. I mean, one thing that always stood out was that my grandparents, when they were leaving Cuba, they had to obviously give up everything that they had before they moved. And one thing that my grandmother did was she went to the shoe cobbler, and she had them put her wedding rings into my uncle's baby shoes. And so they came to the US with their wedding rings kind of hidden into the baby shoes, which is kind of a cool
Wow.
story.
Yeah, it's so sad. I mean, my family moved to the US from Ukraine, and there's so many things that we had to leave there. And I think about, like
Hmm.
even little things, silverware, pots, pans, dishes, bowls, like beautiful
Yeah.
stuff that was made, it was craft, right? That was made however many
Hmm.
decades ago that,
Sure.
were they heirlooms? Not necessarily, but it would have been so cool to have all that stuff and have a little piece of your history. And it's so unfortunate you hear stories like that where you just weren't allowed to bring anything. The government's like, yeah, sure,
Yep.
you want to leave? Goodbye. You're everything you own is now ours.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Um, yeah, completely. And yeah, I mean, I think it's just kind of the US has a story of immigration, obviously. There's so many people have immigrant stories in the US, and I think it's part of what makes America great. We're a huge melting pot as a result. And yeah, kind of like the entrepreneurship journeys, similar. It's like, the just always kind of coming back to that thought of like, oh, being an adult and having three kids and literally having to move to a new place and
yeah.
start from zero. That takes grit, that takes kind of perseverance. And so that definitely shaped me for sure.
Do you know? I'm just curious. When your dad moved here at the age of 7, did the Catholic Church sort of have some sort of have a welcoming program or family or somebody to? I mean, because that's crazy to do that at 7 years old. There must have been some kind of structure there, right?
Yeah, I think maybe his aunt was able to come around the same time, and then
I see.
he lived with his aunt for a few months. But they came not knowing if they were going to go back or if the rest of the
Right.
family was going to come. And then
Crazy.
I remember him telling me a lot of times about stories of going to school and obviously not speaking any English and being reprimanded in school for trying to speak Spanish to some of the kids sitting next to him, just trying to understand what was going on.
Right.
So so yeah, I think that's probably a pretty common theme for immigrant families for sure.
Yeah, it's crazy. And it is, I think it is inspiring to grow up around that and to know that it happened because then, you
Hmm.
reflect on it. You're like, I have nothing to complain about. I mean, that is not something that you
100%.
would ever have to deal with, when you're born here or, like me, I basically grew up here, even though I wasn't born here.
Yep.
So that's awesome. So, okay. So, you grew up here, you kind of, I guess you went back and forth. You mentioned earlier when we were chatting, you actually grew up here and then spent some time in Puerto Rico as well, which probably helped I
Yep.
mean, it's obviously U.S. territory, so it's not an
Right.
immigration story per se, but it's more of a Latin culture. I mean, for sure, right? With
Yeah.
speaking
Yeah, for
Spanish
sure. There was
everywhere.
a culture shock. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
Um,
We moved to Puerto Rico when I was 9 years old, so that was definitely a culture shock. Yeah. Obviously not a legal immigration because it's part of the US,
right.
but Puerto Rico has its own unique identity and culture. Absolutely.
Yeah. But eventually you did go to college back in the US, or back in the
Yep.
continental US,
Yep.
and studied computer science. I'm curious,
Hmm.
as a kid, growing up, did you have entrepreneurship around you and your family, or were you the kid that was like, I don't know, selling basketball cards, baseball cards, or something like that?
Yeah. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur. But as a kid, I would say, I did like kind of little kid entrepreneur stuff. I had a lemonade stand.
Okay.
When I was in high school, I did kind of a computer consulting thing for folks in my neighborhood. I would help people out with their printers and setting up things in their house, whatever they needed. Um, and so I wasn't quite, I didn't do the baseball cards thing or sell candy in school like a lot of other entrepreneurial stories. But I was definitely interested in the culture of entrepreneurship. I started programming when I was 16, so that was back in high school. And there were no classes for it in my school. I was really teaching myself everything. I think through that I just kind of got enamored through this kind of culture of Silicon Valley and company building. Programming was kind of a defiant act back then.
Mhm.
I think that was really interesting to me. And so I was always kind of really inspired by early hacker culture and kind of reading about the stories of the founding of Apple and all of these like big tech companies, all the way back in high school.
I mean, by the way, I would argue that a lemonade stand and uh, uh, having a consulting company, consulting business when you're 16 years old is definitely entrepreneurship. It's funny. It makes me think back. I was super into computers as well when I was a kid.
Hmm.
Like building websites, learning HTML, just like through
Yep.
whatever blogs or whatever you can find. And
Hmm.
somehow, this is why I love asking this question, because somehow it never occurred to me that I can like build a business. It's not even build a business. I can charge somebody for these skills that I'm spending my time acquiring. At the time, like
Right.
what was it, late 90s, 1999, 2000, always
Hmm.
also that Y2K craziness, I could have helped aunts, uncles, friends, parents with website stuff, and it never occurred to
Yeah.
me. And I'm so always amazed and impressed when someone's like 13 years old and they're like, sure, yeah, I'll do this for $100. I mean, wow, make a
Yeah.
hundred, make $50 as a 12-year-old. It's insane. You could
Oh
buy a
yeah.
video game for
Yeah.
yourself, you know.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But yeah, I think as a kid, it was less maybe about entrepreneurship and just I loved building things. I was building things from a really young age. One of my neighbors when I was a kid, I was into Legos, and they had an older kid that had graduated, and they kind of gifted me like a tub full of Legos when I was, I don't know, 7 years old. And so at that age, you could have just found me all day, every day in my room, just building everything that I could. And then was really wanted to build robots for a long time.
Hmm.
I was like as a kid, like on my dial-up connection, like looking up the MIT research labs on artificial intelligence robotics, like way back when.
No way.
And it's I never followed that path. I think it fell off at some point. It's just kind of an expensive hobby and was really hard to pursue as someone without any knowing anyone who was really very technical. But it was fun to experiment, and that's kind of the little kid dreams that you have.
That's cool. I remember I built a website about my favorite rappers, and it was like like Missy Elliott, Tupac, Notorious B.I.G. I wish it was still
I
up
hope
there.
it's still up.
I
Yeah.
don't know. So the host website was X Pages, if you remember that,
Mm,
expages.com. And it was just like a
mhm.
place where you get
Yeah.
some internet real estate.
Yeah.
Yeah, good times, simpler times.
Mhm.
Now it's
Yeah.
just the internet's just not the same. Okay, so you did that. Obviously,
Yeah.
you had an interest at 16 with coding. You ended up going to school. You went to
Mhm.
Stanford. You studied computer
Yep.
science.
Yeah, that's right.
What was sort of the thought, the goal? Was it, let me do this and get a job in Silicon Valley? Was it, let me do this to build a
Sure.
startup? I don't know. Let me just figure things out. I'm just curious, like, where was your head at around that time, if you remember?
Yeah, I mean, I think entrepreneurship was always the goal.
Hmm.
I remember my freshman year, we had to kind of pick a track within computer science, like a specific specialty within the field. And I remember kind of going to a counselor and just, they asked me kind of what my goals were. And I said, well, I want to build a website business. I want to build a web business. And they said, okay, you should follow the systems track then. And so that's what I did. Had a number of internships in college at startups, joined startups thereafter. And so I've really been involved in startups kind of my whole professional career for sure.
That's awesome. Did you find that when you got there, finally, there was mentorship and there were, suddenly you were around all these people that thought like you. There were, adults in the room that had entire careers in computers and technology. I mean, do you remember that being a difference from you being sort of just a kid doing this on your own, figuring it out?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. There's tons of speakers that come to campus. In the early days, I saw some really amazing speeches, or just speakers and researchers that came to campus. some of your, I remember one of my intro professors was kind of like a early employee or an early investor in Google, something like that. And yeah, just other kids in the dorm were always kind of like tinkering with ideas. Everybody kind of wanted to get something going for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah,
So yeah, it's good to be in that environment. Absolutely.
really interesting. Cool. So did that, graduated,
Mhm.
got a
Yep.
job as a software engineer. Now I know that
Yep.
you graduated in 2012 and you launched Pipefile in
Yep.
2019. So you spent a
Yeah.
good number of years actually being, working as a software engineer, learning things.
Yeah.
It's not to go through each of your, jobs one by one, but I'm curious, what did
Sure.
you, because some people they graduate, some people don't obviously, and this famously drop out of the Stanfords and the
Hmm.
MITs and start their
Right.
business. You took the
Hmm.
path of, you know, knowingly or unknowingly learning from existing organizations,
Hmm.
honing your craft, etc. What did you pull out from some of those jobs, that you think has been helpful to you so far, building Pipefile over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really helpful to have that experience and to be, I think if I were to have started the business straight out of college, I would have obviously been very inexperienced, not only like emotionally and personally, but also professionally for sure. Joining other companies and working with other people is really helpful to kind of hone your skill set. I know one of the early, I literally just had to revamp our search engine at Pipefile because search was becoming really slow, and I had to implement a search index. And that was actually one of the first things I did at my first job out of college. So 10 years later, I kind of did the same task over again. But it was kind of cool to see, back then it was really using, building it all from scratch. And these days there's kind of some more pre-built services that make it a lot easier. But kind of just understanding that problem, being like, identifying, I know why this is slow. I know what we need to do. Let's just go and get it done and get that out the door. So having that like technical experience, both working in big systems and then working at smaller startups. So kind of that difference of how do you scale something that's already big, and making sure that it works with a large number of people, to that more scrappy startup mentality of we're starting from scratch. What's the foundation that we're going to lay here? Um, you know, um, how do we get features out the door quickly? How do we really figure out what people need? So yeah, just having that kind of varied experience, I think, is definitely helpful, before starting a business, especially a technology business.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things I really like about that is people don't really recognize the cost of technical debt as companies grow.
Mm,
It's so easy
100%.
in some ways, and specifically, I learned this myself over the years. But specifically, non technical people, they think that just because you've been around for a long time, actually,
Hmm.
because you've been around for a long time, the presumption is
Right.
that you're actually really sophisticated, and when new technologies come out, because you've been around
Hmm.
for X amount of years, you can quickly implement them. But actually, the opposite often tends to be true. If you've been around for
Yep.
some time, you have an infrastructure that was built on technology that was available when you built it. And if you built with
Right.
an eye towards future kind of innovation, you maybe
Hmm.
would have made it in a way that's easier to swap things out or what have you. But not everyone does,
Absolutely.
because in the beginning you're like, we got to get this out the door. What do we have? Great, let's build it. And
Right.
whatever happens in the future happens in the future.
Hmm.
Now,
Yeah.
you get to that future, wonderful, right? Great stuff. And
Right.
now you have
Hmm.
AI, now you have OCR, now you have whatever, the
Yeah.
cloud, right? And
Right.
suddenly it's like a huge endeavor to change your entire, company's infrastructure. But clients don't always understand that. So, I guess
Right.
my point is that by learning, by learning at other companies, watching them go through these challenges and
Hmm.
scale, you come out with the experience and knowledge, and I guess wisdom even, of saying like, okay, we're starting this company. Let's, yes, build
Right.
for what we have now, but with an eye towards the future.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really important to be kind of playing the game a couple steps ahead. And yeah, identify where your technical debt is growing and making sure that you address it in reasonable timeframes. We definitely had periods in Pipefile where we had to kind of buckle down and clear out some of our technical debt, some things that we had built in the early days that were kind of experimental as we were kind of like experimenting with the needs of people, and then going back and re-architecting some of those things, making sure that they're modular and scalable, and fixing things as you go for sure. You have to be careful, as you said, of incurring too much technical debt because it can impede your ability to innovate in the future.
Yeah, and it's funny, I guess, because sometimes, like at least for us, we'll have all sorts of updates and releases, but none of them are kind of consumer facing or customer facing. They're all in the
Yep.
background, and you have to
Of
be like, guys,
course.
no, I swear we're always working on stuff. Just you don't
E-
see it, but that's the
Exactly.
reason. That's the reason
Yep.
nothing breaks, though. So,
Right.
um,
Yeah. Yeah, sometimes there's a tremendous amount of work just to keep things operational and keep things moving forward. And folks don't necessarily see that because it's not user facing features, like you said. But they still need to be done, of course.
and so Marianne here is commenting live. She's saying it's always a challenge to
Mhm.
figure out what people need. People, and by people, I would take that as clients or users, especially
Yeah,
because they're always
customers.
shifting priorities. And
Hmm.
I agreed. I mean, I think the idea is we're always going to be responding to customers' priorities, but if you can
Of
build your
course.
company, you can build your software in a way that is flexible and able to be
Hmm.
iterative, if you will.
Yeah. Yep.
When new priorities come up, you can more quickly address them. So yeah, thank you, Marianne, for the comment. um so you were doing that. You worked at startups, you worked at large
Hmm.
companies, you worked at
Yeah.
eBay, so obviously huge
Hmm.
organization, lots of technical
Yeah.
aspects there with payments and stuff. What do as you were starting to become a more experienced engineer, was there a moment, or like, yeah, where you started to think, okay, I can continue to do this. I mean, I'm sure you
Hmm.
could get greater salary, more responsibility, have
Sure.
lots of options. Was there anything before we even get to the idea behind Pipefile, but was there any moment or series of moments where you started to say, all right, I think I've learned enough where I should start to consider or think about ideas, or did it kind of more so fall in your
Mhm.
lap?
I mean, it was always kind of the plan, but for sure, after several years working, I was starting to look more seriously at what that plan was. And I would always, as I worked, always keep notes of problems that we ran into, ideas I had. So I always just I tried not to like put myself in a position where I was like, okay, I want to start a business. What do we do?
Mhm.
To like as I was working throughout the years, like I had some notes that I would take of just like, okay, these are problems that we're running into. These are things that we're building that maybe are more general problems in the market. And so kind of keeping notes as I went along, so that when that time came, I would at least have some starting point to go from.
Yeah, and that's really cool. I mean, I would probably even recommend that for anybody who thinks that they may want to eventually build a company, right? Like, keep a
Yeah,
list of your ideas. That you
right.
might have 1,000 crazy, even silly ideas. Like, man, I wish pizza
Yeah.
was, I don't know, had 17 layers of cheese, whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
Like, but you just never know. So yeah,
It's totally true.
that's really cool. Where do you think? I mean, this is more of maybe a personal question, but
Mhm.
I don't know. Did you feel like it took you like a certain level of confidence or something to start writing down these ideas? And I ask you this because, like I said, a lot of people have ideas, but when you ask them, they're like, they're crazy. You don't want to hear my ideas. They're stupid. Like, a lot of people's
Yeah.
reaction is to sort of discount their ideas, even when you tell them, I don't care how stupid they are, write them down because one of
Mhm.
them will be, potentially viable. Where did you find that confidence, or like, what motivated you to actually take that step and write it down and say one of these things is going to work?
That's a good question. I don't know. I guess I've just always, I have a very open personality. Like I'm always open to new ideas. And I think that's really important, especially in entrepreneurship. I was just always was surrounded by friends who kind of were always spitballing ideas. I have former roommates who have started businesses. And so it was always kind of like something that I always surrounded myself with, whether it was at work or just in my personal life, just like the people that I attracted into my life. We were always talking about things. And yeah, there were times where we had ideas and we like spent a weekend trying to make something work and then we gave up. And then like 3 years later, one of my friends would send me a link with like, oh yeah, remember that idea we were working on? Like this person just sold that idea for $30 million. And so you have these misses in your life and you start to question it. And it's, at some point you're like, all right, well, it's the time in my life now to take the risk and to go for it. And so let's just see what we got.
Yeah, that's cool. And I wonder if that kind of gives you a little bit of urgency to say, okay, we didn't pursue that. Maybe we thought it was not viable or kind of silly, but someone did, which means that
Yeah.
silliness and viability is actually relative and subjective. And some people might say, no, that's actually a great idea. Here's a whole bunch of money
Right.
for it.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And but beyond that, I mean, I think so much of startup success is in execution as well. I think ideas to some degree are a dime a dozen as well. In high school, I remember hacking on an idea that was kind of like, now that I think about it, kind of like a Shopify concept. It was like like a way to sell stuff online. But without the execution, your ideas, it's kind of, I don't want to say it's worthless, but really you really have to go all in when you're trying to build this company. Startups are really just all encompassing. They just consume your life. They'll, every waking moment that you have, you're in the shower, you're cooking dinner, you're going to be thinking about that business. And so, it really just requires some commitment at a certain point.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Uh, I've had those things too where I thought, oh, that was an idea that I had, and some person just came up with it and actually did
Yep.
it, and that
Yeah,
definitely drove me to start to take steps as well.
for sure.
So you had a whole bunch of ideas over the years. You're writing stuff down. Today
Hmm.
you're the CEO and founder of Pipefile. Um,
Yeah.
Going back to kind of when you really took those first steps, what was the moment where you decided, perhaps this is the idea? Was it a conversation you had with somebody, or, would you just, were you like, I mean, it sounds like you didn't randomly do it, because you don't seem like the kind of person who started a business and
Sure.
then came to look for a problem. You identified a problem. I imagine you even started working on the solution a little bit first, right? Before going into it. But what was sort of the
Mhm.
impetus for that?
Yeah, I mean, I think a big impetus was just the point in my life. I had been working at a startup that kind of went out of business, and I took a year off and traveled. And then I came back and I started applying to jobs, and I just kind of wasn't um, really motivated by anything that I was finding. Um, and just kind of going through my notes, I found an idea for kind of like a secure file transfer idea. And so it was a little bit naive, actually, in retrospect, the way I started it. I started it with this concept of public-private key encryption and like kind of more of a secure file transfer tool. I was working with my accountant, and she was asking me to email her, all of my like personal information. And then, I was kind of like thinking through my list of ideas. And previously, I had worked at a small business lending startup. And we had to collect documents, we had to collect information, and I kind of thought that this public-private key encryption idea would be kind of a cool way to do like a trustless way to transfer information online. And then kind of I just was like, I kind of gave myself a year. I said, okay, I've got enough savings here to pay my health insurance and pay my, support myself for a year, and let's kind of see where we get. Um, and yeah, so then I just kind of built a prototype and then started going out into the market and just trying to present it to everybody that I could find in my town. I was walking into offices, things like that. And yeah, just talking to different people and learning that the security was important for sure, but it was really this like workflow that was more important.
So what was that workflow? What was the problem that you felt you were going to solve at that time?
Yeah, so it was this problem of just collecting documents. So most people, they'll request things over email, and it kind of just creates this rat's nest of kind of, folks respond in one email thread with some of the documents and another email thread with another. And when you kind of multiply that with the number of clients that you have, it's just a discombobulated system. And looking at the market, none of these tools out there really like felt like something that I felt like I trusted and I thought were really like well built, or just that they were older and they had been around for a while. And so, yeah, just kind of working with people and figuring out that yeah, that document collection process is in fact like a process, and it's a big pain point. And it's not just oh, we need a secure way to receive the information. We need a streamlined way to receive the information. Um, and kind of that's where our tagline is. It's get client documents faster, right? That's our tagline for Pipefile. And I think that's really important. It slows down processes. You can only process your clients as fast as you receive their information. And so whatever you can do to speed up that process and make it easier for them, that's gonna result in more clients and more revenue for your firm.
Yeah, and happier existing clients, because then they're not, you don't have to
Exactly.
bug them, follow up with them and say, hey, can
Hmm.
you send this over to me?
Yep.
Obviously, lawyers and others do that all the time, but ideally, you wouldn't have to do it at all. Um,
Yeah.
so this is a great, before, because I want to get into how Pipefile, eventually started to grow, and
Hmm.
importantly, how you kind of found out that immigration lawyers really need Pipefile,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
Before we do that, I just want to take a pause here and give a quick thank you to the second sponsor of this episode, which is Journey, Joorney. So for folks who don't know Journey, they're actually the largest, I believe. They're definitely a leading provider of immigration business plans. So they partner with immigration lawyers and others in the industry, and they help with E2 visa business plans, EB2 NIW business plans, EB5 business plans, L1 business plans, and others. And business plans in some sense are a dime a dozen. Every business school teaches how to write business plans, etc. But for immigration purposes, they're custom tailored to the different visa categories that you need. And Journey is, the leading company that helps you with that. And they support companies opening up, or individuals opening up companies in the US and Canada and Australia, New Zealand, Japan, across Europe and beyond. So, if you're an immigration lawyer listening or watching this and you handle any of these entrepreneurship, visas or any visa categories that require business plans, check out Journey. So their website is joorney.com. There's a link to their website in the show notes. They're a friend of mine that they've been supporting me for a number of years. I've known them for years. They're awesome. So definitely check them out. So, Steve, with that, how did you're walking around. First of all, did you get your initial accountant to use Pipefile? The one who kind of maybe inspired this a little bit?
Yeah, I got her using it kind of on a free version originally, and just trying to get some basic feedback on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, that's the person who, kind of was like, made you maybe in a sense realize that there's a need here. And you were also experiencing it, right? Like in a sense, this was a problem you
Yep.
had because you weren't able to securely transfer documents and data in a way you felt
Yeah.
comfortable. Um,
Yeah, and I also had experience at the previous startup as well. So we were a small business lending startup, and underwriting loans is a very document-heavy process. And so we had kind of built like a simple tool there. And I think I connected the dots kind of later on after I was kind of building things and kind of had a few aha moments later on. But it was kind of like that was a problem that we had at that business as well, which was just being able to collect and request the financial documents for different businesses.
It's interesting. When I was, I had to take out a mortgage for this apartment that I'm in. It was my first
Hmm.
time doing it. It's my first time really buying real estate, and I was
Yep.
connected to a bank from the broker, and this is
Hmm.
super really nice guy, really nice banker. And when he started, was started to request financial documents, stuff that had my social security number, my address, a ton of PII,
Yeah.
and had started to ask me to send it via email. And I was like, no way, dude,
Hmm.
I'm not sending this to you via email. This is private information. You've got to
Yeah.
give me something better. And so then I forget, he used some sort of like weird separate email through, Microsoft or Hotmail. And I told him I
Hmm.
don't feel comfortable with it either because it's still being, transferred just through email. And he said, listen, I'll
Yeah.
come to your house. I'll pick up the data. I'll pick up the
Yeah.
documents, whatever you need.
Yeah.
And I mean, for lack of a better word, I kind of ghosted him. And I feel I did tell him I wasn't happy with that and I didn't feel comfortable. But then eventually I
Sure.
said, look, I'm really sorry. And I ended up going to Rocket Mortgage, which, is a
Uh-huh.
big company. They're a leading, and
Right.
it was the easiest, simplest, you log in, two-factor authentication, everything goes,
Hmm.
through their encrypted site, everything you upload that way.
Yeah.
They would never send you. In fact, I think they probably have a disclaimer that says don't send anything to
Yeah,
us
it's
via
probably outlawed.
email, and so and the thought there is that I'm sure you're selling from the perspective of making it easier and more streamlined, but it's also client retention. I mean, this bank lost a
Yeah.
client because I just did
Yeah.
not trust their processes and they had nothing else to
Hmm.
offer.
It's funny. In the early days, when I was trying to figure out how to really get people to adopt the tool, I was trying to think, the security angle just wasn't really working. And I realized that, like, well, if we can make the system more efficient, and make the process more efficient, then we can actually kind of back ourselves into more people using like more secure tools, because they may not adopt it just because it's more secure, but if it
Right.
saves them time and they can process clients and keep their clients happier, then maybe they will use it. And yeah, I had a similar experience. I walked into a mortgage office in my town, and I cold called them and I tried to schedule a meeting, and then I went to his office. And I remember showing him the tool, and then him reaching behind his desk and pulling out a manila folder. And he had like a very specific mortgage specific manila folder that had different slots for all the different document categories. And he was like, so you've basically taken this folder and digitized it. And I was like, more or less, yeah. And he was having people come into his office every week just to just to pass off the documents.
Mhm.
And as someone who grew up like tech savvy web native, it just doesn't even make any sense to me. Like, why there has to be a tool for this? Like, just send me a link so I can scan all this on my phone and send it to you. Let's make this process easier for both of us and save me the 20-minute trip to your office.
Did he become a client?
He did not actually, surprisingly. I
Yeah.
tried really hard, and he just kind of he liked his
Yeah.
process that he had been with for a long time.
It's so
But
funny how that happened. We definitely had a few
yeah,
law firms that, early on had great conversations with us and like really helped us, feel confident that we're building in the right direction, and then B, give us
mhm,
feedback. And, you think this person's definitely going to become a user. I mean, look how invested they are. And then when it's time for
yeah,
them to actually adopt it as a process, they're like, you know what? No, I'm good. I'm good with what I have. It's really fascinating how
right,
that works. But and I ask it because I think it's more common than people think. And if anyone's listening who's
mhm,
starting a tech company, or don't get discouraged by that, because first of all, those people, even if they don't sign up, they got you to the next step, right? They
yeah,
validated really
mhm,
deeply what you're doing, even if they don't end up signing up. That's number one. Number two, if you're around for long enough and continue to build a great product, those folks may come
mhm.
around, and most likely will come around eventually.
Yeah, I saw a really interesting chart. There's a chart about early adopters versus late adopters. And basically, it segments the population, kind of the market, your potential clients into different categories. And there's like the innovators who are like the 2%, 1% that are like willing to try new things. And then there's the early adopters that will basically take the cues from those innovators, and then there's the late majority, and then there's like the laggards who are like the last people to adopt something if they ever do. And so one thing that I think is important for anybody who's starting a business is remember that like the people who first adopt your product when you're not proven out there in the market, they're going to be those innovators that are 1% of the population. So
Right.
remember that you may talk to 100, keep that in mind. And like, maybe you need to talk to 100 people just to get that one person who's like, you know what, I'll give you a shot. I'll give this a try, or that it really resonates with them. And they're like, wow, this is actually, yes, I love this idea. Let's go.
Exactly. Yeah, having those statistics is so important because it sort of takes the emotion out of the rejections, because they're not really rejections. They're just not at the right. They're not the right person at the
Yeah.
right time. Um,
Yeah. But it
so
is, it
how,
is a very personal and emotional experience for sure.
yeah, and it takes, and this goes back to the immigration piece, right? It takes a little bit of grit, to kind of go through
Hmm.
that and come out of a meeting where somebody says, I mean, you're lucky if they're nice to you when they turn you down. You've got people who be like, why would I ever
Yeah.
do this? This is stupid. Is this legal?
Right.
Whatever.
Right. Of
And it's
course.
easy to feel dejected, but I think it's important to remember that statistically speaking, they were going to say no. So just keep going
Yeah.
until you find that person that says yes. I want to know,
Hmm.
how did you eventually get into the immigration space? I mean, I know that there are a lot of immigration
Hmm.
law firms that use Pipefile. They use Pipefile in addition to or supplementing their existing case management, CRM, et cetera. So clearly
Hmm.
you're sort of filling some gap within the process. And
Hmm.
I can tell you from personal experience and from all my clients, there's a lot that hinges on document reception, or getting it timely
Hmm.
from clients, like you said,
Yeah.
moving forward with the case, getting things done before it's expired, whatever it might be. How did you
Right.
fall into this sort of niche and start to expand within it?
Yeah, absolutely. So during COVID, we did a few webinars with some different Facebook groups. So I think there's a lot of Facebook groups out there online, just online communities in general of attorneys who kind of talk to each other, and they share tools and processes and ideas for how they work. I think trust is a really big thing in the legal community, especially when they're building out their processes. A lot of folks graduate law school and they don't necessarily know how to run a law firm, and especially for solo practitioners or smaller firms that they don't have processes in place when they're getting their firm started. So yeah, we did some webinars with some Facebook groups, and we did one with Nadine Heights, who is the owner of Tips for Immigration Practitioners, an online community for immigration attorneys. And after doing her podcast, doing a webinar with her rather, we started just getting people calling our phone line all day, sending us emails, starting to sign up for the tool. And then, I think once we had that moment, we just really tried hard to service all the customer needs and really talk to customers. I personally did hundreds and hundreds of demos. Got on the phone with attorneys one by one and would walk them through the tool and really find out, okay, where are the pain points here? Where is this? What's this missing? Really kind of like filing that tool down to a useful tool.
So, by the way, Nadine has been a guest on the show, and is anybody who's
Mhm.
in the tech side of the immigration space definitely knows. And
Yep.
probably, if you don't know Nadine, go connect with her. Join her Facebook group, Tips. It's
Mhm.
Technology for Immigration Practitioners is what that stands
Yep.
for.
That's right.
So that's
Yeah,
that's
Nadine's
really
great.
great. And so you started working with immigration lawyers, and do you feel that has that driven the direction of the product at all? Do you feel like were there any changes that needed to be made to the product, or do you feel like it was already what it needed to be for the immigration kind of demographic?
Um, at the time we were fielding a lot of different attorneys in general. So we got a
Mm,
lot of just like tips from different attorneys in general. But absolutely talking to immigration attorneys, has helped shape the product. I know recently we introduced form filling. So now you can kind of upload a PDF form and we'll actually parse all the fillable fields for you. And then the client can just fill that out right on their phone and sign the document. And Nadine was actually one of the first people to point out to me that the USCIS doesn't actually accept digital signatures, e-signatures for a lot of documents, that they need a scanned wet signature. And so, soon thereafter, we introduced a document scanner. So now the clients can just, literally they open up a link on their phone. They don't have to download any software. They just point the camera at the document, and we have a scanning tool that actually converts it to a PDF and reorients the pages, and has all that built in and integrated for things like wet signatures.
yeah.
That's where it helps to talk to your customers and find out, hey, e-signature is great for maybe an engagement letter, or the forms are great for questionnaires and intake questionnaires and discovery, but we can't use it for this particular legal process, and so we actually need
Right.
like a scanning functionality.
Yeah, exactly. And you would never know that, because who would think that that could be a requirement? But if it's a government requirement, there's nothing you can do about it. You just have to sort of work with
Yep.
it.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
I think that's where it's important to talk to the people who are using your tool, and get the feedback from them directly.
so, at this point, um, I think kind of I understand, and hopefully listeners understand what Pipefile does at a high level. How does it work? I mean, walk me through
Mhm.
it. And I'm doing this because for folks who are listening or watching, immigration lawyers
Sure.
and others, just for them to understand how could this fit into their workflow. So what would they expect from Pipefile in terms of usability, experience, et cetera?
Yeah, absolutely. So with Pipefile, you essentially will create a checklist and send it to your clients. And those checklists can consist of secure document uploads, forms, e-signatures, documents that need to be scanned, etc. And you can actually save all of your different checklists as templates. So what most folks will do is they'll create different templates for all of the different case types. And folks like Nadine actually sell some of their pre-made templates. So you can actually buy pre-made templates from her, for all the different case types, to kind of save you time and get you going more quickly. But essentially, how it works is you just select the template that pre-fills the form. You can modify things as needed, edit the forms if they need to be edited, add instructions. You can limit things like, okay, I only want PDFs for these type of documents, or this thing has to be a .doc file or something like that. And then you'll send the links to the client. The client then receives reminders for anything that's outstanding. So it's a live checklist that gets updated as they submit their information. We send them emails and text message reminders to keep them kind of on track. The link works, beautifully on the phone. So for a lot of immigration attorneys, if their clients don't have a laptop, they can actually use it right on the phone. So it's very mobile friendly in that sense. And in some senses, like with the scanner, it actually works better on the phone. And then we have functionality like they can leave comments back and forth, so you can have a whole kind of conversation between you and the client for all the different documents that you need. You can assign these cases to different folks on your team. So if you need to assign it to another paralegal to manage the case, you could do that as well. Um, and yeah, and then we have functionality to kind of approve, reject, mark things incomplete, kind of just like a whole document review workflow. Because I know, big pain point for a lot of attorneys is, folks will submit documents and they're the wrong document.
Mhm.
It's a blurry scan that can't be read or accepted by anyone. It's a photo from their phone that's, you know, covered in shadows and it's just not usable. And so having the ability to kind of kick things back into the client's side of the table. If you multiply that amongst all of the clients that you have these kind of the system that is just constantly going out there and fetching the documentation from your clients. It can really help you move things forward. And I think one of the cool things was, when I went to Island National, one attorney actually told me that after adopting Pipefile that year, her firm saw like a 40% lift in terms of revenue. So they were able to process that many more cases.
Wow.
And that was just really a great experience going to Isla because, previously I was interacting with everybody online through Zoom calls and things like that. And just having a booth there, folks would just walk by the booth and shout, "Hey, Pipefile, like we love your tool. We use this every day." And that really was kind of a surreal experience for me, and reminded me how important it is to like really, really care about the craft and like build a really like easy to use, fun tool to use, that's not drudgery, because folks are going to be, using this kind of all day and making sure that it's
Mhm.
like a pleasant experience and that it's not buggy and that the site works fast and that they can find what they need and do what they need to accomplish.
That's awesome. Yeah, what a great feeling. I mean, I love talking to and seeing
Mhm.
customers in at conferences. Sometimes I even get feedback, like they haven't said anything to me via email,
Yeah,
and then in person they're like, "Oh, by the way, here's a thought," and it's like it's brilliant. And we add it to our
yeah,
product roadmap, or maybe it's something we're already thinking about. And
100%.
it's interesting how even those kind of things come up in person. Do
Mhm.
you have language capabilities? So, for example, checklist with some instructions or whatever. What if the client
Yeah,
doesn't they speak Mandarin or they speak Spanish or whatever? Are there
sure.
options for different languages?
Yeah, absolutely. So before you send it, you can configure that the language that you're using. So
Mm.
typically, you'll build your checklist free form in text. So you type out the document needs. So what a lot of folks will do is they'll write one checklist in English, one checklist in Spanish or Mandarin or whatever language their clients typically use. And then you'll just set the language on the link to that language, and then all of the buttons and any kind of like the stock copy that Pipefile puts out is then converted into that language. And then you can also replace the Pipefile logo, custom brand the link so that it all looks like look it's branded from your firm.
Yeah, that's great because I find that you brought up the point of maybe some of your clients don't have a computer or whatever they
Hmm.
prefer smartphones. I think for especially for family based practitioners, that's probably more likely. I mean, employment based, most folks I would assume have computer access, whether at work or at home. But
Sure.
family based, most people have smartphones at this point. But somebody's
Hmm.
aunt who lives in another part of the world or whatever it might be, their uncle, their
Yeah.
grandparent may not
Hmm.
have it. So yeah, to have it be mobile friendly or at least or mobile first. I mean, I suppose it's probably just as great on
Yeah.
mobile as it is on web.
Yep.
Is
Hmm.
really important. What do you think? What are you guys kind of building towards? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the questions, and I ask this question because sometimes I get asked the same question, right? For us,
Hmm.
laborless is quite specific. We're also solving a pain point that you know is a sliver of the entire immigration process, but it's something that holds
Yeah.
up cases. It creates
Yep.
opportunity for human error, et cetera, their compliance
Hmm.
issues, et cetera. And so sometimes people ask, okay, well, when are you going to get into case management? And I say, I don't want to get into case management. We have amazing tools and
Right.
and colleagues in the industry who do that. Let me do something that's highly specialized, but you still have to progress somewhere. So I'm
Yeah. Of
curious,
course.
what have you thought about Pipefile? Maybe within immigration or maybe just more broadly
Yeah.
across different industries that you service.
Yeah, so obviously, like adding those integrations to all those different case management portals. Right now it's really easy just to export the documents to Google Drive or to a zip file and pass them over. But kind of building more deeper integrations to all those CRMs is those case management systems is for sure important. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, there's obviously other things to do. I mean, we just released the forms and document scanning. That was all feedback from customers that they needed the ability to kind of provide questionnaires and document intake, that kinds of things. Some folks have mentioned that they don't want people to fill out the forms directly. They want kind of like a proxy form to some degree, so that they're not typing in their name 15 different times for all the different forms that they have to fill out. So without getting too into the weeds of our product roadmap, for sure,
Sure.
we definitely have lots of things that we're working on, deeper integrations, and just kind of refining our feature set, making sure that it covers all the different friction points. And that's why we go to conferences like ILA's to talk to people, and especially the people who, talk to people who are using it, what kind of roadblocks they're running into, and then talk to new prospective clients and figure out, okay, why aren't you why don't you want to purchase the tool, and what is it missing, and what would make this attractive to them.
Yeah, arguably also talking to other vendors too, and see where there could be
Hmm.
synergies, maybe there are
Yep.
case management systems that you don't know of, or they may not know you. And so
Right.
to meet them and, introduce yourself and talk about your product, that's definitely
Yep.
happened where sometimes that's the only place I have these conversations with folks. So a couple of
Hmm.
conferences in, so, over the 2 or 3 years, they're finally ready, and then you can
Hmm.
start having that meaningful kind of email discussion about integration or whatever it might be. So yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of conferences. Anybody who follows me definitely knows that, and I always highly recommend it.
Yeah,
By
I
the way,
think
have
it's
you been
just super
to
important.
have you
Super,
been to
super
ABA
important to get
Tech
out there
Show?
and meet people in person. I did actually go to ABA Tech Show. That was the first conference that we went to. We
Yeah,
had another affiliate that was speaking at that conference, and so we went. Looking into going to that again this year. Are you going to that this year?
I might. It's in April this year in 2025. Typically, I
Yeah.
believe it was
Mhm.
been in February. So this year it's in April,
Yep.
and
Yeah,
I
the first
will
time I
be
went was in
around.
February.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
All right.
first time I went was actually in February 2020, and
Okay.
I was hearing on the news this
Oh
thing
wow.
called COVID, and I was
Yeah.
out of, and then I came home the
Uh-huh.
next whatever, a couple of days afterwards, and that's when New York City shut down for quote unquote two
Yeah.
weeks, which
Right.
turned out to
Right.
be 3.5 years.
Yep.
But yeah, great conference for anybody who's listening, immigration lawyers especially. ABA Tech Show is definitely more broad than immigration. It's the American Bar
Yep.
Association, but to the
Hmm.
point of Pipefile, sometimes there are products that can be hugely beneficial to immigration lawyers that don't show up at immigration conferences just because maybe they don't know about ALA, or maybe they
Hmm.
feel that they have a broader reach, and so they go to other conferences, but they might still be
Yep.
useful. So I definitely recommend to immigration lawyers who may be watching or listening to check out the ABA Tech Show as well. By the way, a
Hmm.
little hack: ABA Tech Show is great in the sense that you can go for free and just get a I forget what they call it. It's like uh, um, the vendor area pass. So
Hmm.
basically, can't go into sessions. I mean, lunch you probably have to pay for, whatever, but you can get into the huge hall with all the vendors. Because I think ABA Tech Show has done a really nice job of promoting, the companies that are there. They have a startup
Hmm.
alley. There's actually an immigration tech company, former guest on this show, Lista.io, who does checklists, and maybe that would be a good conversation for you to have. Maybe you guys can have some
Okay.
partnership.
Awesome.
But her company's going to be featured there at the ABA Tech Show Startup Alley. I think there's even a chance for her to win a prize if she's selected as like the top
That's
company.
great.
So anyway, great place for immigration lawyers to go and check out. And you don't have to spend money, like 1,000 or two, whatever it is, for the conference
Yeah.
badges. So cool. I think this is really, I'm so happy that you're here because I think that Pipefile is one of the products, like I was just saying, that isn't, you're servicing a lot of immigration law firms, but you don't bill
Hmm.
yourself as specifically and solely for immigration law firms because
Sure.
obviously you can support a
Hmm.
lot of other people, but I'm glad that
Yep.
you're here to help expose and expand, the knowledge base that immigration lawyers have, for non-immigration products, like more general products. We do have a question here from Michael. Says, Steve, your product seems awesome. I can't wait to try it. Do you have a trial? And as you
Uh,
look back, yeah.
yes, absolutely. We definitely do have a free trial. So that's, I think, a huge portion of kind of what helped us grow in the early days is our free trial. You can come to Pipefile, you can sign up just with your name and email, and that kind of helps you get started right off the bat. You don't know credit card required, so you can get started with a free trial, kind of like a lot of other tech products. You just
Mm.
sign up with your name and email. There's no need to talk to anybody. Feel free to sign up with kind of a personal email and test it out if you like, and then move to your professional email when the time is right. Um, and yeah, so totally free to get started. You'll have access to all of our features in our professional plan during that free trial. And so definitely
Cool.
recommend checking that out. So it's a no cost way to check out the tool, see how it works.
Yeah, and it's pipefile.com. Is that right? That's the
Yeah.
website?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Pipefile.com. That's right.
And then Michael asks a fun question. He says, as you look back on bringing Pipefile to life, do you have funny experiences to share? Before we get to that, I do like to end these interviews or conversations with, maybe like a funny kind of question or a story or a memory. Before we get there, I just wanted to kind of end by saying that I recommend also for the tech industry more integration conversations to happen. I think one of the things
Mhm.
that we've talked about here today is the idea that we're helping lawyers, we're building something that's really useful and efficient for them. But we do end up sometimes being in silos where you'd have to download this thing to Google Drive and then upload it somewhere
Yeah.
else. And like I
Yeah.
said, there have been conversations that I've had with folks over the years about integrations. And I get it, everyone's busy, but I do think that it will service the industry much better when folks, when we all get together and,
Mhm.
shake hands with each other, so to speak, from a technology perspective. So just wanted to get your thoughts on integration. Is it difficult? Is it easy? Is it something
Yeah.
that, we should have prioritize, right, in the industry? As
Mhm.
somebody who's worked at, eBay and other places like sophisticated companies,
Sure.
I'm just curious about
Sure.
your thoughts on specifically APIs and integrations in the legal space.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I mean, there's a huge long tail in terms of integrations to be built. So obviously, like we try to focus on the integrations that are going to have the most impact, right? So if something is used by more people, that's going to have more priority. That's why you see more of the general tools being integrated with first, just because it impacts more people. So like I said, we're a horizontal platform. So somebody can use us with Dropbox and Google Drive if they're in the mortgage industry or if they're legal in the legal industry. But of course, those integrations with the industry specific tools are super important. And I think that's something where we need to do better, 100%. And I think that's kind of one of our upcoming priorities. We had some other kind of core features that we needed to get done first. But now I think we're going to be looking into those tools more aggressively, and just making sure that those integrations actually make sense, making sure that they really do provide value because they are, like we've talked about before, tech debt is maintenance, and sometimes APIs change. I know we've had issues with certain integrations in the past that just the API just stops working, and customers blame you, even though your integration hasn't changed. It's the other party. So I think.
Right.
There's a lot of tech debt with integrations for sure, just because you're working with another party that you don't have control over. So that can be frustrating at times. But absolutely, I think it's important to get these tools integrated with all the different workflows that folks are using, just to remove friction and make the process that much easier.
Do you think clients can advocate for integration with their, because you and I are startups, it's easier for us
Hmm.
to get this done than the larger organization that we want to integrate with. Do
Yeah.
you find that having clients that use you and perhaps the other quote unquote bigger or more general tool can have an impact on whether that tool decides to move things forward with you as a startup or not?
Yeah, I think so. I remember one time I was at one of the conferences and I was speaking to one of the bigger vendors, and they actually were charging us to build an integration with them. Which I thought was kind of crazy. I was like, we're kind of contributing to your ecosystem here.
Mm.
And yet we have to pay to build an integration with you, which I thought was weird. But yeah, I mean, look, people have a voice. If you need something, if you want to see change out there with whatever it is services that you use, emailing the company is going to be the best way to get that, to make that happen, is talking to people. And if you go to the conference, talk to the folks at the booths and say, hey, we love the tool, we'd love to use it, but we can't use it for XYZ reason. And that can absolutely inform the roadmap. Absolutely.
Yeah, agreed. I try to say that, remind some of our clients as well who have our longstanding relationships with immigration case management systems or others. Tell them what you want too. You're their client, and if you want an integration, and you make your voice heard, it then supports the sort of the broader cause. So just using this as a reminder,
Right.
I suppose, for anybody who's
Yep.
watching or listening. So, okay, to wrap this up, I think Michael asked a question, and I think it was a really great one. So I do want to borrow it from him. He asked, throughout the years of building Pipefile, have you had any funny experiences or stories that you kind of come to mind? Whether it's something with people or clients, or maybe like a hiccup or a mistake that you made that was funny at the end.
Gosh, nothing's coming like right to mind at the moment. But yeah, just picking up the phone and having funny conversations with people has always been interesting. I think having a live phone number on the website, is obviously that's important for us to service people and do sales and support. But sometimes other folks get caught up and they call the line mistakenly, which can be funny at times.
So mistaking calls, or people who call you and they don't want to talk about the product, they just want to talk about something else.
Yeah, that, folks, or sometimes clients of clients will call the phone number, and we have to let them know that, hey, this is a software product, and you're trying to reach your law firm, and
Right.
try to nudge them in the right direction.
Yeah, gutsy move getting a phone number these days. We don't have it. You're actually making me think if we should put a phone number on our website, but people tend to reach out via email, but it would be lovely to talk to our
Sure.
clients over the phone.
Some people they just want to get on the phone. I think also super important just for product development is doing personalized demos. So having the
Mm,
ability for folks to book time in your calendar and do like a screen share with them. I think that was like hugely beneficial for us in the early days.
yeah, definitely. We still do it. I mean, for every potential client, that's all we do.
Yep.
So cool. Awesome. Well, Steve, it's been really great chatting with you. Really fun and interesting, story and inspiring.
Hmm.
And I, as a fellow kind of tech entrepreneur building something that's quite, specific, if you will, that
Yeah.
supplements what else is out there and solves a particular problem. I love to see other people doing the same thing, because
Hmm.
it's a reminder that we're not just settling for the big problems, but we're digging deep,
Yeah.
into workflows and processes, and trying to really, I think, smooth out every possible kind of corner that we can. So appreciate you being on the show. Appreciate you sharing the story. Again, website is
Yeah.
pipefile.com for anyone who's interested. And,
Hmm.
good luck. Here's to a great
Yeah.
2025.
Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Yeah, likewise. Talk to you soon.
All right. Take care.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I do want to give a quick thank you to DocketWise again for being the main sponsor of this episode. I won't go through the whole thing again, but if you have been listening from the beginning, DocketWise is an all-in-one case management system for immigration lawyers, and they have amazing immigration forms, customizable questionnaires that also come in a lot of different languages for immigration clients. Lots and lots of integrations. We were just chatting with Steve about APIs and how important it is for different products to integrate and talk to each other. So DocketWise is really excellent at that. Great customer service, and a lot of content and support that they provide for the industry does not go unnoticed. So really grateful to DocketWise for sponsoring this. Check them out at www.docketwise.com, or check the link in the show notes to learn more about them. So with that, thanks everybody again for tuning in, for your comments, and your feedback here. See you on the next episode. Not sure exactly when that's going to be, because I will be in India for the next 2 weeks, and time zones are just a little tough. So probably won't be doing this show for a couple of weeks. But starting February and going forward, we're going to have some awesome guests talking about various products and tools being built in the industry. So I'm really excited. Stay tuned. Share this with your friends, family, colleagues. And in the meantime, have an excellent weekend. Stay safe, and peace out.